and welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. Sorry, we're a wee bit late because we've had some technical problems, but it's worth the wait because it's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald, and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be the chair for this evening's session, which is the 8th of the 8th series. And I'm joined by two lovely midwives, Leonie Rastas and Janine McKnight-Cowan. And as we always do with our guests, we put them immediately on the spot to ask them to share a moment of the week. So Janine, would you be able to share a moment of the week?
I sure can. Thank you for having us today. Hello,
Fabulous.
everyone who's on the call. Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you about my moment of the week. Yesterday was National Authors Day, and I have to say I wasn't really aware of that because this year I've become an author by accident. And yeah, so my moment of the week, Sue, is that I'm really grateful to Netflix for giving us the opportunity to keep up the conversation on C-section recovery. So really, that's my moment of the week.
Whoa, fabulous. Thank you very much. And how about Leonie?
Well, I think my moment of the week was last Thursday when my husband and I packed our van to travel down to Victoria and loaded in the box of books to bring down to a conference for the Australian College of Midwives, or a study day in Victoria. So that was really exciting. It was like a dream come true after 2.5 years writing with Janine, and we're now on the road, and I feel like an old age hippie, really, with our camper van. And some nights we feel like Mary and Joseph, wondering where on earth we're going to park this van, because it's peak period here, and we've been turned away a few times.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, but
well,
we're safe.
That's a great, well, there's two great moments, and they're all focused on this delicious book, which we're going to be talking about later. Just imagine a great big box of these in Leonie's van, and her packing the book, packing the whole van nicely, and Janine with the delight of having authored a book on Authors Day. How lovely. It's lovely to share. Thank you so much. Now, I'm just going to go quickly through the usual things, like to just remind everyone where the Maternity and Midwifery Hour came from. We came from the COVID pandemic, of course, because we wanted to make sure that midwives, student midwives, people in maternity care, which included paediatricians, neonatologists, neonatal nurses, maternity care support workers. So everybody had some access to some manageable information, up to date, just in that hour a week, because it was, and I think it's almost difficult to remember now how scary that time was, and how much pressure there was on people, and how being able to go to study days and conferences was gone. So we wanted to keep that going and keep people able to interact together, and it's been so good, we're keeping on going. So we're very fortunate that Netflix, that Janine mentioned earlier, look after all of the recordings. Everything's recorded. Everything we do for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, everything's recorded. Fantastic resource for midwives and students, I have to say. So anybody out there who's getting ready to do their revalidation, or has got maybe a presentation coming up, maybe you're going for a little interview to get promotion, maybe, or if you're a student doing an assignment, and you often have a few of those to do, this is a fantastic resource of up-to-date information. And if you are a bit lost with so much stuff, because there's over 1,000 clips and videos and presentations, you can subscribe for a small fee, and you can have things that are in like edited little box sets. That can be quite good if you're trying to just save yourself some time. Very good. We're supported with our lovely partners, All for Maternity and the Practicing Midwife, so thank you to them. These are all free to access, perfect for study, and you can share. And if you enjoy, and I know you're going to enjoy tonight, if you enjoy tonight, do share it with your colleagues and tell them all about it, and share the presentation and have a discussion about it, because that's what we want. And I think the topic itself is going to be really, really helpful to you as midwives, students, whatever, to provide care for women and families. I want to say a big thank you to our students and our midwives and maternity care staff, everybody, for the work they're doing at the moment, because it's hard at the moment. Morale is very low. People are feeling very pressured, and it's sometimes hard to keep on going. So look after yourselves and look after each other. It's really important. Now I'm going to move on to news flash. I almost want to do like a news flash. There are still discussions, and that's one of the things that people might be feeling very, very uncomfortable with, but there's still discussions around industrial action, and that's going on through a lot of different groups of workers, including nursing and midwifery, and it's quite uncomfortable. So be aware of what's happening, have a look at the news features, and have a look at your union or your professional organisation, see what they're saying, and really equip yourselves with the information so you know what you're doing, really. Big news, I think, has been the whole asylum seekers issue in the facility in Kent. There's been major overcrowding, which they're addressing at last. And it's been quite shocking to hear about people being cared for or being kept in an area with very poor facilities, with a lack of hygiene, with a lack of washing facilities, and talk of things like scabies and diphtheria. And I hope that can be addressed as soon as possible, because we know there'll be women and babies and children there, as well as men. We don't want to miss the men out as well, but you know, women are probably more vulnerable. Okay, well, I'm going to do something a bit flippant now, because someone asked me today, you know, what do you think about I'm a celebrity, get me out of here? And of course that's in Australia, even though it's a lot of English celebrities. And of course we've got the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock appearing along with Boy George, so that should be quite interesting for those of you who are addicts, and I know some people are to that, so it might be quite interesting from many different perspectives. But I'm going to move on to my favorite, my Action for Happiness calendar, because it's now November. It's too late to do the White Rabbits thing, but there's time enough to get your calendar. Now this calendar is lovely because you can choose to look at one thing every day. Now today, Wednesday the 2nd, it says respond to a difficult situation in a different way. And I love the way you have just something to think about in a mindful way. The references on your resource list, there's lots of delicious references today to look at, lots of clips which are going to be mentioned by our lovely speakers, and ways of getting lots of information. So that's going to be really useful. The other thing it might be useful for some of you to be looking at, especially given the nursing and midwifery proficiencies, is the new All for Maternity new webinar series, and they're looking at examination newborn. And for those of you who might need a bit of a refresher, if you've done a program already, or for those of you who want to improve your knowledge about caring and examining the newborn, not just the night, but the whole holistic examination, look out for that. It's a whole series of webinars which look really delicious, and that's also on your resource list. Okay, now without further ado, the title we're looking at today, or this evening, Caesarean Section. We're looking at it with a slightly different lens. We know the Caesarean section rate's rising, and that also many of the women are transferred to the community really quickly after the birth, so they have to have some care, and we're very aware that care can be very difficult, and if they're not prepared well. And I'm really excited about this. We've got two midwives, they're also nurses, who've developed a fantastic resource for women and families who have or are going to have a Caesarean section. And the book Caesarean Section Recovery Manual, let me flash it up, there it is, nice pink colour, pinky purple, I guess it should be, really fresh off the press this very year. And the two authors, I'm really pleased they can come and talk to us about the provision of care for these mums and the kind of concepts, because it's a very different book, and I've been reading through it and it's really good. Very simple to understand. It's not, I don't think it's basic, it's not that simple, but there are really good things to remind us about, but also women and their families about. And that's my favourite bit so far. And I haven't read the whole thing cover to cover, but my favourite bit is gift ideas for mums after caesarean births, as a little bit at the back of the appendix. How fantastic is that? And it's full of little plans for women to really understand what's happening and cope with it and know what to do if there should be any issues or problems. So fantastic. So I'm going to introduce both the speakers together because they're kind of a little bit of a double act, and you'll see how closely they work together. Fantastic. So I'm delighted to introduce, first of all, Leonie Rastas. She's known for caesarean section recovery advocacy and support. She's a nurse, a midwife, author, educator, innovator, and founding director of Caesar Care, an online service business helping support women after caesarean birth. She's got enormous experience in clinical practice and in teaching midwifery in Australia. And her personal experience of 6 caesarean births has influenced her work, as you'll hear, I think, very clearly, including developing a surgical wound splint, scar trackers, and day planners for recovery. She was admitted as a fellow to the Australian College of Nursing in recognition of her service to holistic healthcare in 2005, when she founded an Australian health promotion charity. And also alongside is the lovely Janine McKnight-Cowan, BEM. She's also a nurse and midwife. She's got huge experience in the NHS as a nurse, as a midwife, as a health visitor, and now as an author. And she's also a Queen's nurse and was the RCNi Community and General Practice Nurse of the Year 2019, and awarded the British Empire Medal for Services to Nursing in 2019 also, I believe. I hope I'm correct.
Actually.
So Janine
Yeah.
and Leonie, the screen is now yours, and welcome.
Thank you, Sue. Well, thank you for having us. And the thing is, I think it's really nice for us to be able to share that Leonie and I met at in 2019, November 2019, at the IME conference in London. And I suppose really we were both there as innovators. Yeah, we were both there as innovators, but we were only one of two, I should say now, 2 of 3 people talking about caesarean sections. So we like to think it's a little bit about where our book was conceived, really. And the whole point of the 10,000 miles apart, the 7,000 internet hours, and the 2 years that we've spent talking to one another since. We developed 55,000 words of 85 years of maternity clinical practice to put down into a book. And I suppose really the reason why we've done that, and the reason why we're here today to share with midwives and all maternity care workers who are on, is that we want to highlight our roles within C-section recovery and the crucial conversations that we should be having with women, the listening to and the acting upon, because for myself, the 4th trimester is so important. And I've walked the walk, both in clinical paths, being a scrub midwife, a labour ward midwife, and being in community as a midwife, and then making that transition into health visiting and looking at the continuity of care with women in the community. It's so important that mothers and the transition to motherhood after caesarean section, it is so different to the care that they receive in hospital and what happens to them in the community. So Leonie and I, we've both done the day ticks at work, we've both informed our managers, we've registered the risks, we've spoke to our unions, and we've looked at policies and worked really hard to do our own innovation and develop and work with guidelines. But it was Leonie and I's passion that once we met in London and once we realised that we were both wanting to be advocates for women's recovery, that we agreed we wanted to make a difference by doing what matters and writing the book by midwives, for mothers has been that journey. So the next slide really says it all. If we could just flick to the next slide, Amy. Because once the stitches are in, the whole of the healing begins. And Leonie's going to take us through some in slide 3, some of the things, and then I'll come back to you again and we'll do some further discussion about the aim of us being here talking to you today about the recovery journey from C-section. Hey, go ahead, Leonie.
Next slide, thanks. Okay, so the World Union of Wound Healing Specialists tell us that the surgical site infection rate is between 3 and 15% after caesarean birth. And the wound separation or wound dehiscence is 2 to 8%. And we also know that thromboembolic disease, women are at risk of embolism up to 12 weeks postpartum. And I think that one situation that I encountered during my career was the death of a beautiful young mum 4 weeks after giving birth. And I know that the hospital I worked at didn't have any antenatal classes for caesarean birth, and certainly no handouts or any information about the risk of embolism after discharge. So that I can never forget that, you know, young mum, first baby, and hearing that she died 4 weeks later, that that's one of the things that has stayed with me and encouraged me to write the book and have it as a resource for not only the women and their families, but just as a reminder for midwives that this information really it is part of their role to be able to share and caution women before discharge about what might happen and what to look for. So Janine's going to talk about some of the tools that we've developed to help women monitor their own healing a little bit later. But we'll move on to the next slide now. And this is just, you know, a wound infection on day 18. And we know that wound infections can happen up to day 30. So that's, you know, if a woman's discharged 24 hours after birth, and this is slowly developing, and she hasn't had any education about how to view the wound, what to look for, what does a normal wound look for. And I advocate a handheld mirror to hold down and to look every day. And we'll talk about the scar tracker later, but that's just an indication. You know, we know that the infections occur you know, after discharge. That rarely you would see one in hospital. So that's an important role the midwife can play in cautioning the women to be alert to the possibility. Thanks. Next slide. So I have a Facebook group called All Things C-Section, and some of the pictures that the mums post are really alarming. And as you can see here, this woman she's noticed she's got a little hole in her wound, and she's asking, is this okay? Is this normal? What should I do? And you can see, before I even got to respond, there was a woman saying, get to hospital. That's how mine started, and it exploded open. So, you know, the women don't have this sort of information, so they're turning to social media for their advice, which is really worrying. And I'm, as a Caesar mum myself, I am a member of several caesarean groups, and this is really common. Next slide talks about some conflicting, non-evidence-based advice that's being given to women. This was, someone sharing what she used to clean the wound, and down below it's talking about salt and water and surgical spirit. So we see a lot of that happening. We see a lot of the postnatal education coming through social media, and it's not always good. So we wanted to be able to provide this evidence-based information for the women to be getting good advice and not getting into trouble with things like, some of the advice they're getting. Next slide. So the World Union of Healing Specialists talk about the importance of patient education during all phases, antenatal, intrapartum, and postpartum, is critical to preventing these surgical wound complications. Now, of all of my caesareans, not one of the healthcare providers' services provided any education. Now there are, in Australia, there's a lot more hospitals. They are offering caesarean birth education, but when I had my children, there was nothing. And I was really unteachable after my Caesars. Like most women, we have a lot of analgesia on board. There's fatigue, exhaustion, the effects of the drugs. So it's really hard for midwives to be able to impart the necessary information and advice in that postpartum period, and particularly if they're only in for 24 hours. In Australia, we, have a flood of visitors, within hours of caesarean birth. So we're also up against that. It's not easy to be able to get access and to impart information that will stay for these women. So that creates quite an issue. Next slide. I'm just going to run through some of the ideas that we've come up with, and these can be all found in the book. So beginning with, I think it was 3 years ago, and this is what I brought to the IME, the surgical aftercare splint, or the SAC splint. That came out of a real frustration at work. I was finding I would maybe get 3 or 4 Caesar patients, because whether you, I'm not sure if you know that Australia, we have 37.2% Caesar rate. And so I'd go in and the first thing I would always start with was wound support, splinting your wound. And I'd say, now, do you have a rolled up towel or a cushion to hold against the wound to counter that forward thrust during sudden movements, and hopefully reduce the incidence of breakdown? And 9 times out of 10, the women hadn't had the education and certainly didn't have a rolled up towel or a cushion. So one day I was making a rolled up towel and the dad said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just making a splint for your wife, to have nearby in case of sudden movement." And he challenged me with, isn't there anything in your storeroom designed for this? And I had to say, well, no, this is what we've been doing. This has been sort of nursing 101 for 40 years. And that got me thinking. So I went home and I created the splint that young mum is holding, and it's just basically, it imitates a rolled up towel, and I've added an elasticized belt so women can have that. They can have it they can be hands-free to hold their baby, and just in those early days or weeks, just to have it nearby is a great reassurance for them and support. So that was that. Then the day planners. that was something that I thought would have been really helpful for me, because in those early weeks, the fatigue and the busyness and the pain and all the mobility limitations, that really, you sort of lose track of time. Well, I found I did, and sometimes I'd forget, have I had my tablets? When did I last eat? And all these sort of things. So that's where the day planner began. And then when Janine and I got together writing the book, we really grew that to 6 weeks. So in the book, there's the 6 weeks of day planners, checklists for mums to keep on track. The next section is the journal pages. So we thought it was really important to have, for mums to have a space just to write and journal and debrief how they're feeling, how they're going, maybe, document some of their challenges, their high points. So we've created a little guideline for journaling and several blank pages with little prompts that they can fill out. So the book actually becomes a workbook because of the planners and the journal pages. The SCAR tracker, I'll leave Janine to talk a little bit more about that, but that was just another point of frustration where I thought women just don't know what's normal. And so I've started this SCAR tracker, and now we've extended it for 30 days so that women will be able to see early signs of problems. And the pain points, that's when I sat down to write down the pain points, working from top to toe, there's so many pain points that can be associated with surgical birth. And just to reassure women that, they may have the headaches, they've had a general, they may have a sore throat, the shoulder tip pain, the discomfort with the breasts, and then of course the wind pains and the wound pains and constipation, all those things, and then the calf pain if they have DVTs. So to be able to just normalize that and offer simple remedies is really important, because the myth that caesarean birth is the easy way out can be, debunked in just that little story about the pain points and how long it'll take them to get back to, pre-pregnant fitness and activities. So that's really important. 5 Guide is Janine's wonderful tool that she's going to talk about, and debrief. Those are key points in the book, but I think I'll hand over to Janine now to finish talking about the book in more detail and how it applies to the UK situation. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the book. What you're going to hear. Next slide.
Next slide. I think, Leonie, from just hearing you talk, I think there's so many health promotion messages and crucial conversations that we have to have with women. And like you said, there isn't that time. The workforce is stretched as it is. And if women are discharged early, then it does leave little time for health promotion. But, this 5 Guide tool could be your way in to be your own personal professional reminder. And like Leonie and I did come together through innovations that happened in clinical practice. Clinical practice came from my experience as a midwife, then into health visiting. And again, like Leonie, a one day wonder happening when you're with a patient. That's what happened to me. I was with a student health visitor. We were visiting a lady postpartum. It was her first day that I was visiting her as a health visitor. She'd had a C-section. And I simply said, you know, held my hand up, 5 fingers, and said, do you realise you've got 5 layers? So the hand that you can see in front of you and the 5 guide tool is explained that I use the hand to explain the 5 layers of healing. So number 1, my thumb is your skin layer, and I'm explaining to this lady, you then got a layer behind that, your fat layer, you've got your muscle layer, you've got your peritoneal layer, and then your little finger is the incision through your womb to deliver your baby. This conversation opened up the opportunity for it. Then, as always, I said, shall I have a look at your wound and see how it is? I was horrified. The lady had got a sanitary towel over a weeping wound. The student health visitor, after we'd finished the call and the contact, and I'd explained all about wound care and referred her on, then obviously to the wound care team, said, that tool's great, Janine, you know, you really should do something with that. And literally out of that came the opportunity to go through the RCNi Foundation, and it was supported to become an innovative health promotion tool for C-section. There's a video for you to look at in the book and move on from that. But it's not for me to talk too much about 5 Guide. I just wanted you to explain to you what it is. We're nearly 200,000 Caesarean sections across the UK. Nearly 1 in 3 women are having C-sections. And some of that we know why. It's going to get bigger. The agenda of women being able to have care, that they are able to make choices. The Ockenden report. Basically, you know, we've also got investigations going in induction of labour research. There's a 27% chance in my own locality that if you have an induction of labour, you're more likely to have an emergency C-section. So, yes, Leonie and I came together, and we're quite right that the antenatal prep is quite poor in Australia and in the UK, even though it's policy driven in the UK, that it almost seems a taboo subject to have with women. But I asked that question of the midwives and the student midwives and the maternity support workers and everyone on the call today, how prepared are women to be one of those 1 in 4? Are we preparing them? Are we having that crucial conversation with them? And as Leonie said, you know, they're often, if it's a planned section, if it's not, if it's an induction of labour and they've gone on to have an emergency section, sometimes they're discharged within that 24 hours. So thinking about the midwifery role, do you also realise as midwives that most health visitors haven't got a maternity background? So when you make that discharge to your health visiting team, that the competencies and skills of health visitors do not include obstetric and maternity management. Now, we're great at breastfeeding, we're great at maternal mental health, but we seem to stop at the point of wound care and whose responsibility it is to look at that wound after the midwife is discharged. Now, I know most midwives would want to hold on to a suspecting wound that may be looking a little bit iffy, but in my experience and 22 years in health visiting, most of the discharges had happened at day 10. The picture Leonie showed you was of a BAME skin tone at day 18. Now, there's another issue there around wound care and ethnicity. What you see as red in a Caucasian woman, you would not see that in a BAME skin. Thinking about us as midwives as well, do we do that handover properly, or are we relying on IT technology to tell the health visitor that there's been a C-section or she's had a car crash delivery? You know, the handovers aren't as good as they could be. wound care, and as Leonie said, is our biggest fear, because we have spent some time doing some work within the book looking at postpartum sepsis, and we do refer you to a video which is on the screen now, and when you get the slides, I strongly advise you to have a look at it, because sepsis is absolutely one of the major causes of postpartum sepsis in women who've had C-section is their wound. And we jointly developed Scar Tracker in line with NICE guidelines, because we truly believe that women should be having wound care management for 30 days. Now, with personalised care, that can be delivered, we're hoping, with investment of self-supported, self-managed care needs, where a woman is issued and discharged with a Scar Tracker tool. It's in the book, so we're not going to reveal it all. The Scar Tracker is in the book, but what it does allow is a woman to self-monitor her wound, so that she does miss out on some of the risks that can come after caesarean section. And that's before we've even discussed anybody who has a large BMI, before we've discussed anybody who's a diabetic, before we look at anybody who smokes. And we know that Black and minority ethnic women are 5 times more likely to suffer with a lot of the postnatal and maternity complications. So we're employing to ask midwives within this talk today to look at good self-supported management, to consider the care needs of partners as well, who are left at the theatre door when it is that emergency section. There's a new report out today by dad.info, and it says men are 47 times more likely to commit suicide in the perinatal period. Now, how often do we ask dads for a birth debrief if they're the one that have had to see their partner be rushed into life-saving, baby life-saving, emergency caesarean sections? How important is the birth debrief? How important are surgical site infection rates? I'm sure to share this statistic with you is really important, that 75% of surgical site infections are evident at day 14. Now, if the handover isn't right and the care and the transition into health visiting service isn't right, just think about how many surgical site infections out there go unnoticed. And are we sadly underestimating the recovery upon discharge? You know, the take it easy, that is simply inadequate. 5 Guide has to be the new health promotion tool for you to remember what you need to say, rehearse what you need to say, and personalise it to that individual woman. Because we don't know who is looking at wounds once you discharge your ladies as midwives. We can't say, because in some areas it might be good, in some areas it's not. And within health visiting, it is an issue that I'm looking at the scope of professional competence. However, let's know that we've scrapped the targets on caesarean sections, so it's a free-for-all now, and literally with personalised care, you do have the choice to ask for a caesarean, and if inductions of labours are also encouraging the fact that the increase in caesarean section is likely to result in an emergency caesarean, then we need to encourage women to take ownership of their recovery. And that's what we hope we've done in the book. And thank you, Sue, for saying it should be the book that every mother has on discharge, because, you know, to get that investment from ICSs would be absolutely a godsend, because the risks are truly there. Do we spend enough time with the education about pain management, constipation, that headache that you get afterwards, those flu-like symptoms that may be postpartum sepsis, adhesions, blood loss, bruising, DVT, VBAC, you know, sexual relationships? It's endless health promotion. Who's doing it? It's all in the book. So to sum up, if we want you to take away one thing in this, is the book is great. It's a mother's recovery resource. It's 85 years of nursing, midwifery, health visiting, and experiential. Leonie's had 6 Caesarean sections. It's all gone in there. It's all evidence-based. Our aim is to reduce surgical site infections. We want to reduce readmissions, but we ultimately want to increase the knowledge and understanding of women so that they can self-care, they can self-manage, they can do the policy rhetoric of personalised care if they're given the tools to do it. We want to encourage good handovers to the health visitors. Why? Because there's a complexity and changing behaviour within women's health. There's a workforce crisis. We're now going to have 2 Ockenden reports. We've got nice guidelines that saying we should be monitoring women for 30 days and we can't, but we want to. But how can we? We need to bring women as part of the care plan as well. Continuity of care has been halted in most geographical areas as well. And obviously, for me as well, the 5 times more likely BAME issue has to be raised. We've got a job to do. It's a hard job to do. Leonie and I have hopefully put a lot of that energy for you to say to women, if they've had a C-section, to recommend the book. You know, we don't get anything out of it. Our publisher takes 85%. We've not done it for that reason. It's a legacy written book. But, you know, our whole aim, in the next slide, as you'll see, is just to leave that legacy so that C-section recovery, your body is returned to the health and well-being that it was before you had your baby. So Sue, I hope we've left you enough time to ask us questions and take us into the next stage. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to Janine and Leonie for that. For both presentations, because I think you've given a real feel of why the book has been developed and what's in the book. And I know that there's some resources on the resource sheet which our audience will have access to 2 little video clips on YouTube. And I was just wondering, because you're talking about things like wound care being a very important part of it. And I'm sort of wondering how much access, because of course, I suppose at the front of all of our minds at the moment is the financial crisis for a lot of people, and maybe getting a book, it might have to be a book that's shared, or a book that's maybe in a maternity you might have a couple of copies that you can lend out. Though, of course, there's bits that as a mum you'd want to be filling in, like what your gifts would be or your tracking. And I'm just wondering how much have you got online that women could and midwives can access to point women to? And that's one. I think I'll start with Leonie and then Janine, if I might, for that one.
Well, so there is an ebook available through Amazon. It is designed to be the mother's personal record book, like you know, you have the baby memory books, and this is a mum memory book. So ideally, it is one for each woman. What I am doing in Australia is I've created vouchers for healthcare professionals. So if they recommend the book to a mum, they can get there's a code to give them 15% off. So I'm trying to do that through, you know, all the drops that I'm doing on this tour. That's what I've created, so that hopefully we can get more books out. But also, you know, in an ideal world, the hospitals would be providing them. But I don't know how far we'll get with that. But it is really, actually, my 28-year-old son, you know, when he looked at it, he said, oh, Mum, this looks like something every woman should have on her bedside table. And I thought, oh, thanks, Tom. Very good insight. But yeah, that's how we feel. It's the little lilac book that every woman should have. So that's our dream.
Well, maybe it would make I mean, obviously, if a woman's having a planned cesarean, she may have family or friends who might give her the book as a kind of a help, her journaling.
Yes.
Especially if they're into journaling, it might be a really good thing. So those of you who are out there who've got friends who might be in that situation, this might be even better than a bottle of smelling salts, bath salts, or a new nicey or whatever, because this is real. You know, information is power, isn't it? I think Janine's going to say that.
Yes,
it is. You know, because I think it's buy a gift that matters. That's basically,
yeah.
And that's some of the requests for the book are coming that way. But you know, maternity and neonatal voices are absolutely loving it. So who knows? You know, with the right approaches with the ICS and with raising the risks, again, this has been a different way of getting in. Consumer voices are very, very powerful. And I think without standard operating discharge procedures, it could be interesting from the callers that, you know, are they aware about wounds being managed? Literally, if you've got a leg ulcer, there's a standard operating procedure for you to have that wound managed. If you've got an intra-abdominal Caesarean section wound, in most authorities, there are not standard operating procedures. So if you've not got one in your authority and you're a listener, please get in touch with me, and I'll certainly support you in how you can write that recommendation that a SOP for wound care management happens for your C-section ladies.
Fantastic, thank you. This is another language, actually, the SOPs. Standard operating procedures. So actually, those of you who are out there, be worth checking whether there is such a thing in existence in your locality. And Janine and Leonie are great resources to go to if there aren't. Okay, I've got some more questions. I'm looking away because I've got another screen where the questions are coming up. And I've had a question from Louise, who says, is there a link for the Caesar charity, please? I'm not sure quite which charity Louise might be after.
Caesar Care isn't a charity. That's my business.
Okay.
Yeah, the health promotion charity is phna.org.au. So it's Pastoral Healthcare Network Australia, and that's really dealing with grief and loss and spiritual care, spirituality and care.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that's in the resource as well. Thank you very much for that, Leonie. Thank you. Okay, Delia Mohammed, hi Delia, says, if a mother has no family support, what resources are there for her once she's home? And that's a really good question, but though a little bit, how long is a piece of string? Janine?
Well, yeah, for me, I would answer that by personal self-management is so important. So knowledge is power. So if mum hasn't got a support network at home, obviously under the personalised care heading, we should be looking at social prescribing, we should be looking at other agencies. If we knew that mum was going to have a C-section antenatally, no mother should obviously be in her postpartum on her own. But the book in itself, you know, if it was translated, if it needed to be translated, is a resource in itself. There is little or no other documentation for women to have the knowledge of everything that could be happening. There is not that time for health professionals to stay with a mother. However, just going back to the handover, the midwife will know before the health visitor knows about who's around to look after that mum. And that's the connection, Sue, in the UK, having that good visual look at what's going on in a mother's home in the early days postpartum, so that the handover to the health visiting team can look at the social needs if that mother needs any extra support that won't come from midwifery, but could come from other agencies that health visitors can connect to.
This is the midwife as the orchestra, as it were.
Yes.
And sometimes actually, and as a midwife, you would be actually signposting the woman. If you know antenatally, then you can signpost her to what she needs to think about, instead of being, oh, I can cope with this, that, and the other, and everything. Leonie, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I was just going to say Pinky McKay, who has written quite a few books in Australia, talks about the petal roster. So as well as the agencies, encouraging the women to draw a flower with 5 petals, have in the centre will be the coordinator of the roster. So that comes from friends and family. So you can give them each a day and what the mum needs help with. And I think that's a fantastic idea and something I would have really valued, because I was all alone when I had my first, and I was totally lost, just really shell-shocked. And I'd moved to a new suburb. I had all my friends were working, family lived 3 hours away, but to be able to find, support within your local community just for that 6 weeks, maybe to do, one would Wednesday do the washing or shopping or whatever. But that, I think, as well as agency support, it's really good to give women permission to build their own little support network for that short period, and they can pay it forward down the track. But it is give them permission and really encourage them that they really need support, because this is major surgery, and most other surgeries have a rehabilitation program. But with Caesars, we don't have another individual working on us 24 hours a day. So that's I think a really important thing. I love that idea of the petal roster.
The petal roster, I love that roster too, and I think it's a really good idea. And also to make clear to people who are visiting you that, it's not about cuddling the baby. It's about doing the housework, about doing some cooking and cleaning and the things that really stress women.
Big section in the book on that. So, about your support network.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I can remember.
I'm going to remember the petals. The petals. That's lovely.
But sitting down, I can remember feeling as weak as a kitten and looking at the carpet, a spot on the carpet, and desperately wanting to vacuum it. And one, I didn't have the energy, and two, it was too heavy. And just, for someone to come in and say, how do you need help? I'd be throwing the vacuum at them. But it was just really hard. I didn't know what I didn't know. So it's all in the book.
Yay. And I think, this is about women not being superhuman. They are superhuman, but not having to do it all the time. Okay, I've got a few more questions. I've got, someone's already, Holly Edmondson, hi Holly, has already ordered her book.
Wow.
Comment. And Pippa wants to know when the book's released. It's released, it's there. Because it's been proved by Holly. Holly has proved it's there. So that's fantastic. And there's lots and lots of comments. Mia says, how can women access the book? I think Amazon. That's already been said, either Amazon, and Leonie was saying about being able to get it as an ebook as well. Whether I still like a paper book personally.
Yes.
I like writing in it, but everybody's different. So that's good point. Okay, so well done, Holly. And Philippa is saying, I'm not sure if this is the right question for my speakers here. What are your thoughts on how midwives can better support the microbiome of babies born via Caesarean section? This is quite a big thing in midwifery. I'm not sure if this is quite in your book.
No, it's not.
There is in the Matflix set of things there. We do have some speakers talking about microbiome, Philippa. So that's where you need to go. have a look, or just have a look on, if you put microbiome and mothers into YouTube, you will find a Matflix video there. Have a go at that and let me know how you get on. Now we've got the lovely Jo Daguston, often comes to our maternity hour. Hi, Jo. And she says, thanks so much for a very informative session. Such an important area for attention. The speaker's passion for supporting better outcomes comes through so well. See, let's hope that lots of testimonials come through from women so the NHS Trust think about supplying on discharge. Thank you very much for your work. So well done. Thank you, Jo. That's a lovely testimonial yourself. That's lovely. And then we've got another comment from Holly Edmondson. Hi, Holly is saying, it's shocking the lack of education. I've done lots of research myself. I like the Paint the Bump website and the POGP, I think, Fit for the Future leaflet. We'll be recommending this book. Thank you for that. A friend was turned away from the hospital twice with postnatal pain after C-section. They finally admitted yesterday, and today's been told it's a group A strep. Oh, gosh. She only went back in because I pushed her too well. Holly, big well done. We need to look after these mums. Because though there's loads and loads of information, we still need to make sure they're getting access, because when something happens to you, it's not like in a book, is it? You need someone to support you through it. So thank you for looking after your friend. Okay, Edith KK, sad to hear about BAME 5 times more. Absolutely. Has there been any research and conversation about any benefits of melanin or skin pigmentation in relation to healing?
Right. There has been conversations, but I think for me to answer about the BAME, it's more about skin tones and spotting the signs and symptoms. It's clearly a minefield with skin tones, because not everything comes up red, swollen, and horrendously looks as though it's going to pop like a pimple, depending on what the skin tone is. So for me, there's a lot of networks that I'm working with regards to wound infections and BAME skin tones, and Scar Tracker will be involved with a lot of that work within the NHS, so that we do get it right for all women, and all women know the signs and the symptoms, because they're clearly very different with skin tones and melanin tones.
And also it may be about the practitioner assuming all is well. That's the other thing.
Assuming all is well
if you've got pain, it's normal.
And our NMC registration clearly says keep people safe and maintain the integrity of the profession.
That's a beautiful point.
Literally, we put ourselves on the line here by, our revalidation and our NMC fees each year. We're signing ourselves to say we'll do good. So we've got to keep abreast of the fact that if there's a risk, we have to be accountable and literally do the best, because the consequences can be quite horrendous with a C-section recoveries around the area of infection. We've not even delved into the maternal mental health or the ongoing problems that it can have with fathers and relationships and family and attachment and bonding and feeding.
This might be the next book.
It's in this book. All of those things.
No, we might expand it. There'll be more. That's that's the point I'm making.
Gosh.
Okay, we've got Abigail. Are we allowed to recommend the book to women if we've read it without asking the trust we're doing placements with, or does the recommendation need to be okayed by whatever trust you work in?
You know what? I'd like to answer that one, because the recommendation is that we're both clinicians with 85 years of experience. So it is an evidence-based book. The long-term plan says we need to be looking at other resources, and we need to be considering personalised care, and we need to be considering self-supported self-management. And the historical making every contact count. If you've got good resources, good knowledge that you want to recommend, there is no policy that is going to say to you, you can't recommend a book. No one's going to make a profit out of this book, except the women are going to be forewarned, forearmed, and be able to look at preventing the preventables, because there's so many avoidable risks that women fall into post C-section. We can avoid them. So recommending this book is not going to be a problem. I've already had that conversation with my own organisation in the UK, who hopefully, will advocate that this is a book to be shared. This is a book to be recommended. Fantastic. This is a book to be on a woman's bedside table.
Okay, or on a bookshelf, either one. I mean, it's I think, Abigail, I'd sort of reinforce that also it's important to read. So whatever you're recommending someone to have, you've read yourself and you know what's in it, because sometimes there might be things that will raise questions that you need to be able to discuss anyway. Now we're coming back to a last couple of questions, because I know we've run over a wee bit because we started a little bit late. I've got a comment from Laura Gilmore. She's ordered a book too. We're doing well here. And that now there's, I think Natalie's looking for some contact details for assistance with SOPs. So we might deal with that later, I think.
Yes, they're on our slides.
Fabulous. So I want to say a big thank you to Janine and Leonie. What I didn't warn Janine and Leonie, which I normally do our speakers, is to say this hour goes faster than any other hour in the whole world. Every time it just goes, there's so much in it. And I've really enjoyed this hour hugely and found it really useful. And I'm going to carry on reading the book before I can recommend, but I'm recommending it to people because I think it's a really useful resource for us all as midwives. We need to know this stuff. And we need, I think what emphasized for me was it makes me think about even putting myself in the woman's shoes even more. And I think we need to always do that, to think, what would I feel like if that was me lying in the bed and I can't even get up to hold my baby? If I'm at home all on my own, my wound looks a bit dodgy. It's scary times, and we need to make sure our women and families are looked after, as well as the babies. Now, so big thank you to Janine and Leonie, and also to Amy, who's behind the scenes looking after everything, and Angelo, who's looking after everything, and Paul, who's sending through the questions to me so beautifully. Resources are available. This will be going out as podcasts on Friday. So if you like to go running and listening to us, that's there. Just to remind you,